The world had known suffering before. Wars, famines, diseases, and the endless cycle of greed, power, and betrayal. Yet, for all the suffering, there had always been a flicker of hope, an innate drive in people to fight for good, to rise above their weaknesses, to create something better for themselves and others. The world seemed, at times, on the verge of an abyss, but humanity would always find a way to survive, to rebuild. It had been that way for centuries. But this time, something darker had been set into motion, something that could not be easily undone. In the shadow of the celestial realms, where light and darkness collided in eternal struggle, a new plan was being devised. For eons, the devil had watched, waiting, growing patient, knowing that humanity would eventually reach a breaking point. He understood their desires, their flaws, their insatiable lust for power, their propensity for hatred. And he knew that the time had come to tip the scales in favor of darkness. He would not act alone. It would require more than just his influence. It would require agents, beings with the power to infiltrate the human world and tear it apart from within. 3 demons, each representing a different aspect of human weakness, would be sent to Earth to carry out this mission. They would sow chaos, confusion, and corruption on a scale never before seen. They would be the harbingers of the Antichrist's arrival, a being who would rise out of the ruins, born of destruction and despair, to lead humanity into a new era, an era where darkness would reign and the light would be forgotten. The first of the demons was named Asmodeus. He was the demon of lust, the embodiment of desire and temptation. His power lay in the manipulation of the human heart, in stoking the fires of passion and turning it into something twisted. Asmodeus had the ability to draw people into his grasp with nothing more than a glance, a smile, a whispered word. His influence spread like a disease, feeding off the basest instincts of human nature. Where there was love, he sowed obsession. Where there was loyalty, he planted betrayal. Asmodeus was not concerned with the physical destruction of humanity. He would leave that to the others. His mission was far more insidious. He would corrupt the hearts and minds of men and women, turning their most intimate connections into hollow, self-serving obsessions. It was through lust that he would weaken the foundation of human civilization, making people forget their true purpose and giving birth to a society where only indulgence mattered. The second demon was named Mammon, and he was the demon of greed. Mammon's power was born from the insatiable hunger for wealth, status, and material possessions. He had no interest in the spiritual or emotional needs of human beings, only in the physical world and the chains it could place around people's souls. Mammon had the ability to warp the human mind, convincing them that success and material wealth were the only things worth pursuing. He would whisper to the rich, convincing them that their wealth was their birthright, and to the poor, he would make them believe that they could be rich, that they were just one step away from greatness. Mammon could manipulate entire economies, turning honest work into a mindless pursuit of profit, feeding an insatiable lust for more. He would destroy communities, families, and individuals by turning them into slaves of greed, and in the process, he would create a fertile ground for the Antichrist to rise. A world where everyone was focused on themselves, where compassion had been replaced by competition, and where the idea of the greater good was no longer a reality. The third demon was named Belial, and he was the demon of lies. He was the master of deception, the one who could twist the truth and make even the purest of hearts doubt their own perceptions. Belial's influence was subtle, often unseen, but it was powerful nonetheless. He planted seeds of doubt in the minds of leaders, turning them against each other. He manipulated the media, spreading falsehoods and creating division where there had once been unity. He exploited the weaknesses of individuals, turning them into pawns in his grand game of deceit. Belial's goal was to destroy trust, to make people question everything they believed in, until there was nothing left but confusion and fear. He would make it so that no one could tell friend from foe, truth from lies, and in doing so, he would tear apart the social fabric of humanity, leaving it vulnerable to the chaos that would follow. Together, Asmodeus, Mammon, and Belial formed a triumvirate of destruction. They would not act openly, for that would be too obvious. Instead, they would work through subtle manipulation, through the forces of human nature that people themselves could not resist. They would sow discord in families, in communities, in nations, until the world was a fractured, broken place, ripe for the coming of the Antichrist. Their plan was long-term, for they had patience on their side. They knew that once the seeds of destruction were planted, the results would not be immediately visible. But over time, they would grow, and the world would begin to fall apart piece by piece. Asmodeus started first, infiltrating the hearts of humanity. He knew that the key to corrupting people lay in their relationships, intimate bonds, the connections that held society together. He began with the leaders of nations, planting seeds of infidelity and obsession in their hearts. He made them seek power in ways that were driven by carnal desire rather than genuine ambition. He whispered to politicians, convincing them to use their influence for personal gain, to sacrifice loyalty and family for fleeting pleasure. But he did not stop there. He reached into the lives of ordinary people, feeding their insecurities, turning their relationships into battlegrounds where love and trust were replaced by jealousy, lust, and betrayal. Through Asmodeus's influence, marriages began to crumble. Families were torn apart by affairs, by obsessions, and by desires that were never fully satisfied. The notion of true love, of sacrifice, commitment, and selflessness, became a distant memory. People became more and more isolated, consumed by their own desires, with little regard for the feelings or needs of others. This was only the beginning. Belial worked in the shadows, twisting truth into lies. He manipulated the media, turning news into entertainment, shaping narratives to serve his dark purpose. He made people question the motives of their leaders, of their neighbors, of their families. He fed the fires of suspicion, of mistrust, until no one knew who they could trust. Belial whispered falsehoods into the ears of the powerful, convincing them to sow division. He made them turn their backs on those who once stood by them, to betray their closest allies for fleeting political gains. He worked tirelessly to create chaos, protests, revolutions, wars, each one a result of his lies, each one making the world more unstable, more divided. People were no longer united by shared values, they were divided by mistrust and fear. Families no longer came together for dinner, they came together only to argue. Nations no longer cooperated for the good of the people, they fought each other for resources and power. Asmodeus, Mammon, and Belial had done their work well. The world had fallen into chaos, into confusion, into greed and lust. Humanity had turned on itself, forgetting its purpose, its values, its love for one another. And in the midst of this growing darkness, the Antichrist began to stir. Mammon followed close behind, exploiting the human thirst for wealth. He saw that the greatest weakness of humankind was their constant striving for more, never satisfied with what they had. He began by subtly nudging entire industries toward greed. He whispered in the ears of the powerful, convincing them to exploit the weak, to use their money to control the masses. He spread the idea that wealth equaled success, and that material possessions were the measure of a person's worth. Mammon made people obsessed with money, driving them to compete with one another in ways that were destructive. The pursuit of wealth became the sole focus of their lives. Families were torn apart by financial pressures, friendships destroyed by jealousy and competition. Whole communities were left in ruins as people fought for resources, for power, for more. Greed became the engine of society, and no one could escape its pull. People worked harder, longer, sacrificing everything for the next big score, the next promotion, the next possession. The very concept of charity, of sharing and helping others, became a joke. In this world of Mammon's making, only the strong survived, and only the greedy thrived. He was a being born of the destruction the demons had wrought, a creature who would rise to power in a world of chaos. He would unite the broken fragments of humanity under a single banner, a banner of darkness, of tyranny, of control. The Antichrist would bring with him a new era, one where the demon's work would come to fruition. He would be a leader who understood the weaknesses of humankind, a figure who would promise peace but deliver only suffering. And with him, the demons would finally complete their mission, to bring about the end of light and the rise of darkness. But there was still time. There were still people who fought against the tide, who saw the truth behind the lies, who rejected the greed and the lust that had consumed so many. These were the last holdouts, the few who could still resist the pull of darkness. They would have to act quickly, for the demon's influence was strong, and the Antichrist was close. But if they could unite, if they could see through the web of lies, if they could reject the temptations that had corrupted so many, they might yet be able to turn the tide. It was a battle for the soul of humanity, one that would determine whether the light or the darkness would reign. And in the end, it was up to those who still believed in truth, in love, and in sacrifice to stop the demons and their master from bringing about the end of the world as it was known. The final hour was at hand, and the fight was only just beginning. We've gotten to the end of this video. This video will teach you to be careful about these demons and to resist them.